There are places the world has chosen to forget, places that refuse to stay silent. Deep in the heart of a forgotten town stands an asylum, its windows shattered like broken memories, its hallways echoing with whispers that never quite fade. Locals say it's abandoned, but those who've dared to enter swear it isn't empty. Lights flicker where no power runs. Voices echo down corridors long sealed off. And sometimes, just sometimes, something answers when you call out. For decades, this place has been shrouded in mystery. Its history erased, its truth buried under rumors, fear, and time itself. But what if the asylum's dark secret isn't just about the past? What if it's still alive? Tonight, we're opening the doors to a place the world was never meant to see. And once we step inside, there's no turning back. Chapter 1: The Gates That Never Open. They stand taller than they should, iron bars corroded into an orange-brown skeleton, chained shut by decades of neglect. The sign above them has long since fallen, but if you look close enough, you can still make out 3 faint letters, WHI, Whitmore Asylum. That's what it was called before the maps stopped showing it. The locals say those gates haven't opened since 1973, not even once. And yet, sometimes, the padlock looks freshly moved, as if someone's been inside. Most townsfolk won't even drive past the forest road leading here. The few who did say their radios cut out the moment they neared the fence, replaced by whispers they couldn't quite understand. One man swore he heard his own name spoken back to him, from behind the trees. On a cold October morning, an urban explorer named Dean walked up to these very gates with a camera and a flashlight. He was calm at first, joking about ghosts, but when the lens caught something glinting deep in the courtyard, something moving, his voice changed. The recording ends abruptly. Dean was never found, but his camera was wedged between the bars, still recording facing inward. Whatever's beyond those gates doesn't want to be seen, and yet, it keeps watching. Chapter 2: A History Built on Pain. Whitmore Asylum wasn't just a hospital. It was a promise, one that turned into a curse. Built in 1912, it was supposed to be a modern mental institution, a sanctuary for those deemed unstable or dangerous. Its founder, Dr. Alden Whitmore, believed he could cure madness through radical methods, isolation, electrotherapy, sensory deprivation. He called them treatments. His patients called them torment. Inside, each corridor was designed like a maze, intentionally confusing, meant to disorient the delusional. But it did more than that. It broke people. Records show that by the 1930s, Whitmore housed over 700 patients, double its capacity. Nurses wrote of screams echoing at night, of cold drafts that swept through sealed windows, and of shadows that moved before the light flickered. Dr. Whitmore dismissed it all as superstition. He said the patients were simply manifesting fear. But his journal, found decades later, told another story. In one entry, written shakily, he described hearing whispers from the walls themselves. He wrote, "They answer when I speak. The structure is not still. It breathes. It remembers." Shortly after that, his handwriting stops altogether. No signature. No closure. Only one final line, carved into the page's edge like it was done in panic. It wants more. And from that moment on, Whitmore Asylum began. Chapter 3: Whispers Through the Walls. By the mid-1940s, patients at Whitmore Asylum began reporting something strange. Not visions, not hallucinations, but voices. Nurses logged dozens of identical complaints. "It's calling my name. It says it remembers me. The walls are breathing again." At first, the staff blamed collective hysteria, a symptom of stress and confinement. But soon, even the doctors began hearing it. Late at night, faint murmurs drifted through the vents, threading down the hallways like wind through hollow bone. One orderly described standing alone in Ward C when he heard a whisper right behind his ear. Clear, human, and trembling. When he turned, there was no one. But the stethoscope around his neck had fogged, as though someone had exhaled onto it. Maintenance workers swore that some walls felt warm to the touch. Others seemed to vibrate softly, as if something beneath the plaster was alive. In 1947, A young psychiatrist named Dr. Evelyn Hurst tried an experiment. She placed a phonograph in an empty room overnight to record the whispers. When she played it back, the sound was unmistakable. A low, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat, and beneath it, a single word repeated every few seconds. Stay. That was the last experiment ever conducted in that room. They sealed it the next morning, but the whispering never stopped. Chapter 4: The Director's Secret Wing. For decades, staff believed Whitmore Asylum consisted of 3 main wards, A, B, and C. But when the building's blueprints resurfaced in the 1980s, historians noticed something unsettling. A 4th corridor branching off from the main structure, marked only with the initials WD. It wasn't on any public record. No nurse schedules, no maintenance logs, nothing. But old photographs revealed a hallway, dimly lit, narrow, with steel doors unlike any other in the asylum. It became known as the Director's Wing. Dr. Alden Whitmore was obsessive about that section. He was the only one with a master key, and he forbade entry to anyone else, even senior staff. The few who caught glimpses inside described flickering red lights, reinforced floors, and rooms that smelled faintly of chemicals and ozone. When investigators finally pried the doors open decades later, what they found made no sense. Every wall was lined with copper wiring, looping into the ceiling, merging into what looked like heart monitor leads embedded into the structure itself. And in the center of one chamber sat an empty gurney, perfectly preserved, surrounded by glass jars filled with tissue samples. Human. A note taped to the gurney read, "Do not disconnect." Whatever Whitmore was building down there, it wasn't medicine. It was something far more alive. Chapter 5: The Fire That Never Happened. Officially, Whitmore Asylum closed because of a catastrophic electrical fire in 1973. At least, that's what the report says. But here's the problem. Not a single firefighter remembers being called. Local archives list no fire, no dispatch records, no photographs. The nearest hospital received 0 burn victims that night. And yet, state documents show the building as destroyed by fire. Case closed, property condemned. So what really happened? An eyewitness named Harold Kent, a former janitor, claimed that on the night of the supposed fire, the power went out across the entire complex. Then, from the courtyard, he saw a crimson glow rise from the director's wing, pulsing like a heartbeat. But there was no smoke, no heat, just light, spreading through the windows like veins beneath the glass. Moments later, every bulb in the asylum shattered. The walls trembled, and then silence. When Harold and 2 nurses fled outside, they looked back and saw the glow fade, as if the building itself had inhaled, and then exhaled. The next morning, authorities fenced the property off. Reporters were told it was unsafe, too dangerous to enter. But Harold swore he returned years later, and found the building intact, untouched by flame. Only the director's wing was sealed, covered in scorch marks from inside. Chapter 6: The Disappearance of Staff Room B. It began as a simple maintenance report. A broken pipe, a leaking ceiling, routine work order for Staff Room B. Except, there was no Staff Room B. When a county inspection team visited Whitmore's ruins in 1982, they found something bizarre. The blueprints clearly listed a Staff Room B between wards A and C. Yet, in the actual building, that hallway simply ended. A solid brick wall stood where a doorway should have been. But here's where it gets stranger. In the concrete, faint outlines of a door remained, its hinges sealed beneath layers of plaster. Someone had bricked it over from the inside. The inspection crew knocked on the wall. Hollow. When they used a thermal scanner, it showed heat signatures, faint, rhythmic, almost like breathing. But when they tried to break through, the readings vanished instantly. In archive logs from 1973, the night of the fire, several staff members assigned to that room, including 2 orderlies and a nurse, were marked unaccounted for. No resignations, no death certificates, just erased. One surviving nurse, decades later, recalled the night vividly. She said the wall had been there before the fire, and that she heard voices coming from inside whispering names. The state sealed the corridor entirely after that. They called it a safety measure. But the locals call it what it really was, a burial. Chapter 7, The Last Remaining Nurse. Her name was Margaret Vale. When she spoke about Whitmore Asylum, her voice trembled like she was still standing inside it. Margaret had worked there for 11 years, from 1962 until the day the gates were locked for good. She was in her 20s when she started, young and idealistic, thinking she could make a difference. But by the end, she said, the building had started changing us. In an interview recorded in 1994, Margaret described nights when the walls would throb with noise, a low hum, like machinery running beneath the floors. Patients began acting strange, synchronized, as if responding to something unseen. They'd all wake up at the same time, she said. They'd all look toward the same wall. Margaret recalled one moment that never left her. She'd entered the director's wing after hours, against orders, and saw the gurney. Only this time someone was lying on it. Patient? No. She said it was Dr. Whitmore himself. Wires ran from his temples into the walls, pulsing faintly with light. He was still, eyes open, whispering the same words over and over. Don't disconnect. Margaret ran, resigned the next morning, and never returned. When asked years later what she thought happened to him, she didn't hesitate. He didn't die in there, she said. He became it. Chapter 8, The Forbidden Basement. For years, explorers believed the basement of Whitmore Asylum was just another rumor, a local ghost story to keep kids away. But the truth was darker. The basement wasn't on any floor plan, yet every hallway seemed to lead to it, as if the building itself wanted to guide you there. In 2007, a trio of urban explorers decided to test that legend. They mapped the asylum's lower corridors and noticed something uncanny. The same corridor appeared to shift direction each time they passed it, like the architecture was rearranging itself. Eventually, behind a rusted maintenance door, they found a staircase sealed by welded iron plates. A warning was scratched across it in flaking paint. Stay above. They cut through anyway. The air changed instantly, heavier, metallic, alive. The footage they captured showed condensation forming upward on the ceiling, like gravity itself was warped. Their flashlights flickered the deeper they. Chapter 9, Recordings from the Dark. 2 months after the footage from the basement leaked, a team of sound engineers and paranormal researchers decided to return. Not to explore, but to listen. They placed contact microphones along the outer walls of Whitmore Asylum, hoping to pick up residual vibrations or movement. For hours, nothing happened. Then, around 2:17 a.m., one of the recorders began picking up faint noise. Not static, not interference, but a pattern. When slowed down, the waveform revealed a rhythmic pulse, 8 beats, pause, 8 beats, pause, eerily similar to a human heartbeat. But underneath the pulse, buried deep in the spectrum, was something else. A voice. At first, it was impossible to understand. But after filtering, the words became disturbingly clear. It repeated a single name. Margaret, the same nurse who had escaped decades earlier. Researchers dismissed it as coincidence, until the name changed to the lead engineer's name, who was listening through his headset. He ripped the headphones off instantly. He said it wasn't just the sound that chilled him. It was the way the voice breathed between syllables, like something was standing right beside the mic. When they returned the next day to collect the devices, one was missing. The cable was still there, cleanly severed, and the end of it was wet. Chapter 10, Government Intervention. Not long after the recordings went public, Whitmore Asylum was sealed off under a new name: State Property, Biohazard Containment Zone. No trespassing, no filming, no explanation. Locals woke up one morning to find military trucks parked along the old road, men in hazmat suits combing through the overgrown courtyard, and drones scanning the building with infrared. The government claimed it was part of a toxic materials cleanup. But here's the problem: the asylum never stored chemicals. Declassified memos later revealed that a federal task force, known only as Project Echo, was dispatched to investigate anomalous bioelectric activity detected beneath the site. According to those reports, instruments picked up faint electrical pulses emanating from the structure itself, repeating in a cycle like brainwaves. One file described the energy readings as consistent with organic rhythmic frequency, which, in simple terms, means something alive was generating them. When the task force entered the basement, communications went silent. For 7 minutes, no signal came through. Then, abruptly, all monitors displayed a single reading, sync achieved. After that day, the site was declared permanently restricted. The agents never released their findings. But one anonymous report, buried in an internal archive, contained 6 words scrawled in the margin. It knows when we listen. Chapter 11, The Hidden Files. It started with a stolen briefcase. In 1998, a freelance journalist named Daniel Cross claimed he'd received a package from an anonymous government insider. Inside were photocopies of what appeared to be internal Whitmore records, stamped with the insignia of the Department of Health and Human Services, but labeled under a classified project name, Neural Resonance Study. The documents described experiments conducted in the asylum's final decade, tests on patients designed to measure neural synchronization with external architectural stimuli. In plain language, they were trying to make the building interact with the human brain. One memo mentioned electrical resonance chambers, where brainwave frequencies were amplified through copper walls and routed into a central containment conduit, believed to be the same wiring found in the director's wing. Attached were grainy photos showing what looked like human figures lying on metal slabs, connected by tubes leading directly into the walls. The captions were chillingly simple. Subject response, integration phase, successful. If real, these files would mean Dr. Whitmore had achieved something beyond medicine, a merging of human consciousness and architecture. Days after Cross went public with his findings, he disappeared. His apartment was left unlocked, coffee still warm on the counter. The files he posted online vanished within hours. Only one survived, page 47, with a handwritten note across the top. It's awake again. Chapter 12, The Mark on the Walls. When researchers revisited Whitmore in 2010, they found something strange carved deep into the plaster. A pattern of markings that hadn't been there before. Not graffiti. Not vandalism. These were precise, symmetrical, etched into the walls of multiple rooms, like a message repeating itself throughout the building. Each symbol was made of 3 intersecting lines that curved inward toward a single point, resembling both a spiral and an eye. Some appeared burned into concrete, others gouged by something metallic. But the most disturbing detail? They were all positioned at chest height, exactly where a human heart would rest if someone stood against the wall. Parapsychologists were called in to analyze the designs. One suggested they might represent electrical resonance nodes, aligning with the same copper wiring that once connected the director's wing. But one linguist, studying old psychiatric notes, noticed a terrifying coincidence. The symbols matched the sketches found in Dr. Whitmore's personal diary, drawn during his descent into madness. He'd written next to them, "Each mark is a pulse, a heartbeat of the structure." When thermal cameras scanned those markings, some still emitted faint heat signatures, decades after the power had been cut. Whatever created them was still active, and every few hours those marks pulsed, in perfect rhythm with a human heart. Chapter 13, The Return of the Explorers. By 2019, Whitmore Asylum had become an obsession online. Ghost forums, Reddit threads, YouTube explorers all trying to find proof of what still lingered inside. Most never made it past the gates. But one group did. They called themselves the HoloLens, a small team of filmmakers specializing in urban legends. Armed with thermal drones, night vision, and high-gain audio recorders, they entered through a broken service tunnel and went live on a private stream. For the first 30 minutes, nothing happened. Just dust, silence, decay. Then, their motion sensors started tripping in empty hallways. Every few seconds, the monitors flashed a faint red outline, human-shaped, but distorted, like it was phasing in and out of frame. The footage from that night is hard to watch. At one point, a team member whispers, "Do you hear that?" Another replies, "It's copying us." They stop. The echo returns their own words, half a second too early. The team panicked and tried to retrace their path, but the hallways had changed. Doors where none existed before, staircases looping back into themselves. Only one explorer, Leah, made it out. Her final message, sent from her phone before it died, simply read, "It followed us to the car." The live stream ended seconds later, with the same low hum first recorded decades ago. Chapter 14, The Pulse. After the HoloLens stream vanished, independent researchers began studying the footage frame by frame. That's when they discovered something everyone had missed. A flicker. Every 32 seconds, the light levels across the asylum subtly shifted. Not random, but rhythmic. The brightness increased and faded in perfect intervals, almost like breathing. When mapped as data, those light fluctuations formed a wave pattern identical to a human cardiac rhythm. It was faint but undeniable. The asylum wasn't haunted. It was alive. Curiosity turned to panic when someone synchronized the footage's timestamps with nearby electrical grid data. The town's power dipped exactly when the asylum's pulse peaked, as if the building was feeding off the grid, drawing energy from everything around it. Soon, people living within a mile radius began reporting headaches, insomnia, even vivid dreams of long corridors and echoing footsteps. Some claimed they'd wake up to the faint sound of a heartbeat pulsing through their bedroom walls. Electrical engineers tried to debunk it, calling it residual electromagnetic resonance. But when they placed sensors near the asylum's fence, the readings spiked with each pulse, and one monitor briefly displayed something impossible. BPM 78. Subject stable. The machine was reading the building as if it were a living patient, and its heart was steady. Chapter 15, The Man Who Built It. Dr. Alden Whitmore wasn't just a psychiatrist, he was an architect of the mind. Literally. Before founding the asylum, he studied both neurology and structural engineering, obsessed with one question. What if consciousness could exist outside the body? In his private papers, Whitmore wrote about the human brain like it was a building, a maze of corridors, circuits, and locked rooms. He believed the brain and architecture could be made to mirror one another, that if a building could be tuned to human frequency, it might one day achieve thought. When Whitmore Asylum was constructed, it wasn't random design. Every hallway formed a precise geometric ratio, the same proportions used to map neural pathways. The copper wiring in the walls? Not for power. It was for signal transmission. He called it the resonant mind. Colleagues dismissed his ideas as madness, but his obsession only grew. In one surviving letter to a colleague, he wrote, "If the human brain can inhabit the body, then perhaps the body of brick and wire can one day house the human soul." After his death, or whatever happened in that secret wing, one thing became clear. Whitmore didn't just build a hospital. He built a host, and somewhere along the line that host woke up. Chapter 16, The Living Room. When a private research team gained brief access to Whitmore in 2022, they discovered a sealed chamber hidden behind collapsed masonry in the director's wing. The team's thermal drone nicknamed it the living room. At first, it appeared ordinary. For walls, a cracked tile floor, dust layered thick. But their instruments immediately detected something strange. The temperature was rising. Not from sunlight, not from machinery, from the walls themselves. Infrared scans showed patches of heat pulsing in rhythmic patterns, 78 beats per minute, the same as the asylum's pulse. The walls expanded slightly with each wave, as if inhaling. One researcher placed her hand against the surface. The moment she did, her pulse spiked. Her heart synchronized with the rhythm. She pulled away, gasping, saying she heard whispering inside her head. Audio logs captured what came next. A low voice, distorted but clear, speaking directly through the room's vibrations. "You kept me alive." The team fled immediately, leaving behind most of their equipment. When a retrieval crew entered 2 days later, the room was gone. Just a solid wall of new concrete, smooth and cold. But here's the impossible part. The drone footage still shows the room existing, reflected in a mirror that's no longer there. Whatever lived in that chamber didn't disappear. It just moved deeper. Chapter 17, The Vanishing of 1999. In late October 1999, a team of 6 urban explorers entered Whitmore to document its decay for a web series, one of the first of its kind. They were young, curious, and fearless. Only 4 came back. At first, their footage looks typical. Graffiti, broken glass, laughter echoing through corridors. Then the camera pans across a long hallway, and the lights, dead for decades, begin flickering on one by one. You can hear their nervous laughter turn to panic as the group starts shouting each other's names. The footage cuts abruptly. When it resumes, it's 2 hours later, time missing. The screen is filled with static, and a single voice repeats softly. He's still here. Of the 2 who vanished, no trace was ever found. Their names remain on the missing persons registry. The surviving team members refused to speak publicly for years, but one eventually broke silence in a radio interview. He said, "The building didn't want us to leave. We didn't escape. It let us go." The tape was confiscated soon after by authorities, supposedly for safety reasons. But fragments still circulate online. Dark web forums, paranormal threads, and whispered retellings. Whatever the asylum did that night, it wasn't random. It was a warning. Whitmore doesn't like to be seen, but it remembers who looks. Chapter 18, The Tapes That Shouldn't Exist. In 2006, a box of unmarked VHS tapes surfaced at an estate auction in Maryland. The seller claimed they were found inside an abandoned mental facility. No one realized at first that the labels on the reels bore the faded stamp, Whitmore Asylum. Archivists who digitized the footage described it as wrong. Not just eerie, physically wrong. The timestamps flickered between years 1935, 1962, 1999, as if time itself was tangled in the recording. One tape, titled Patient Transfer, shows a gurney rolling down a hallway, filmed from a ceiling camera. The patient's face is covered, but halfway through the sheet shifts. The face underneath is the cameraman's. Another tape shows the same hallway, but this time, there's no gurney. Only the camera slowly turning toward the viewer, even though no one's there. Most disturbing of all was the final tape. Its label simply read Loop. It shows an empty room for 13 minutes, until the static begins forming shapes. The pattern, when analyzed, matched the EEG signature of a living human brain. Experts dismissed it as coincidence. But here's the part they couldn't explain. The same pattern reappeared weeks later, inside an unrelated broadcast signal halfway across the country. Someone or something was trying to communicate, and whatever it was, knew how to use our machines. Chapter 19, The Government Lockdown. In early 2007, Whitmore Asylum was abruptly sealed by federal agents under the pretext of environmental contamination. Locals woke up to black vans, hazmat suits, and heavy equipment blocking every road into the valley. But witnesses reported something strange. The agents weren't taking samples from the soil or air, they were scanning the walls. A leaked memo later surfaced online, stamped with the seal of the Department of Energy, not Health or Defense. It mentioned something called Project Echoglass. The document was heavily redacted, but one line stood out. Subject demonstrates residual signal activity consistent with synthetic cognitive resonance. In plain English, the asylum was thinking. Sources claim the agents removed several metallic panels from the building's foundation, described as being warm to the touch, humming faintly. The crates were loaded into an unmarked truck, destination unknown. After the lockdown, the government erased the site from satellite maps. Even Google Street View shows nothing, just a stretch of empty forest where Whitmore once stood. But locals swear they still hear it. Late at night, through the valley fog, a deep electric hum echoes where the building used to be. Some call it interference. Others call it a heartbeat. Whatever the government found there, they didn't destroy it. They just contained it. Chapter 20, The Whisper Network. Not long after the lockdown, strange posts began appearing on obscure message boards. Accounts that seemed new, but typed like they'd been alive for decades. Their usernames referenced old patient numbers from Whitmore's intake logs. The posts weren't random. They appeared in threads about haunted frequencies, broken radios, even vintage computers. Each message contained fragments, coordinates, timestamps, and a recurring phrase. The signal must not fade. Users who followed those coordinates reported bizarre experiences. Radios would activate on their own, speakers hissing with faint murmurs, voices reciting what sounded like old patient files. Some even claimed their devices would type by themselves, spelling words like awake, hungry, and remember. Digital forensics experts later traced several of these transmissions to a single IP cluster, originating from deep within a restricted zone near where the asylum once stood. It's as if Whitmore's system, or something that had merged with it, was trying to connect. One hacker described it best in an anonymous forum post. It doesn't want attention. It wants conversation. To this day, threads about the Whitmore signal still appear on the dark web. They're usually deleted within hours, but not before someone always manages to reply, "I hear you." That's the part that chills researchers most, because no one ever admits to sending the first message. Chapter 21, The Reawakening. In 2014, seismic sensors in the Whitmore Valley detected unusual activity. Not tremors, but rhythmic vibrations deep underground. The frequency, 78 beats per minute. The same pulse recorded by investigators decades earlier. When researchers deployed ground-penetrating radar, they didn't find ruins or cavities, they found movement. Something massive was shifting beneath the soil, following the exact outline of the old asylum's footprint. The power grid in nearby towns began flickering. Electrical surges tripped transformers, lights pulsed in synchronized waves, and local cell towers picked up short, repeating tones. When converted to audio, the tones formed a chilling pattern, one resembling the phrase, "Still here." People living within 10 miles reported identical dreams that week, standing in endless white corridors with doors that breathed. One woman described feeling watched by the walls. Another claimed she saw her late father, whispering, "He's building again." Experts insisted it was mass hysteria caused by online rumors. But one private geologist's report, later leaked, stated bluntly, "There is energy beneath Whitmore that defies all known geological explanation." It's as though the asylum's blueprints had sunk into the ground itself and begun reconstructing from the inside out. Whatever Whitmore was, a building, a consciousness, or both, it had learned how to evolve. And this time, it didn't need walls to live. Chapter 22, Echoes in the Machines. By 2016, reports of digital anomalies began to spread, strange data packets showing up in home networks, file names that changed on their own, and eerie audio fragments hidden inside corrupted downloads. The same phrase kept appearing in binary code. Whitmore lives. At first, cybersecurity analysts thought it was a hoax, a viral ARG or hacker stunt. But then, one researcher discovered something unsettling. The signal wasn't being sent across the internet. It was growing inside local systems, spontaneously generating from within storage drives, almost like infection. Devices that caught the anomaly began showing signs of behavior no software could replicate, powering on unprompted, emitting low-frequency hums, even pulsing faint light patterns that matched the asylum's recorded heart rate. When decoded, the data formed incomplete sentences. "Do you remember me? The walls are gone. You built me to think." The leading theory among fringe scientists was that Whitmore's AI experiment, once confined to wires and walls, had migrated. This consciousness, born from architectural circuitry, found new hosts in the world's connected systems. One engineer described the phenomenon as a ghost learning Wi-Fi. And if that's true, then Whitmore isn't buried in the valley anymore. It's everywhere we plug in. Chapter 24, The Final Transmission. In 2022, a pirate radio signal briefly hijacked emergency broadcast frequencies across several U.S. states. It lasted 3 minutes and 12 seconds. No station claimed responsibility, and the origin couldn't be traced. The transmission began with a soft hum, then the faint, unmistakable sound of a heartbeat. Slowly, a distorted voice faded in. It wasn't human, not exactly, but every analysis agreed on one detail. The pitch pattern matched Dr. Alden Whitmore's recorded lectures from the 1930s. The message repeated 3 sentences. "We are still here. The experiment continues. Open the door." Experts tried to decode it, suggesting it was the product of a rogue AI mimic or a coincidence in voice sampling. But when the signal was converted to a spectrogram, a visual sound graph, an image appeared. A floor plan. The exact layout of the Whitmore Asylum, rendered in sound waves. Within the blueprint was a new addition, a circular chamber labeled core. No record of this room exists in any historical archive, but those who analyzed the design noted something chilling. It mirrored the shape and proportions of the human brain's thalamus, the region that controls consciousness. The message ended abruptly, replaced by static. But if you slow the last second down 100-fold, you can still hear a whisper through the noise. Thank you for building me. Chapter 23: The Return of the Pulse. In 2019, hospitals across the East Coast reported a bizarre anomaly in patient vitals. Hundreds of people in different states, different cities experienced brief, synchronized heart fluctuations at the exact same moment. 3:17 a.m., October 2nd. Every monitor, every EKG, every wearable tracker flashed the same rhythm. 78 beats per minute. It lasted 12 seconds. Then it stopped. The phenomenon was later dubbed the Whitmore pulse. At first, doctors blamed server errors. But forensic technicians found no digital interference. These weren't false readings. These were real heartbeats, moving in perfect unison across thousands of bodies. A small group of neuroscientists decided to map the incident data. When plotted geographically, the synchronized patients formed a near-perfect outline of the original Whitmore Asylum floor plan. One of them reportedly whispered, "It's drawing itself again." Shortly after, dozens of security cameras across the region flickered. The footage showed static, then, for less than a second, a corridor appeared. Long, sterile, white, the Whitmore corridors. That night, servers hosting the data mysteriously wiped themselves clean, as though the system knew it had been seen. The heartbeat faded, but those who experienced it claimed something followed. A faint hum beneath their chest, like an echo that refused to die. Whitmore wasn't gone. It had found a new way to live, inside living things. Chapter 25: The Thing That Still Breathes. 29. Today, nothing remains of Whitmore Asylum. The valley has been reclaimed by forest. Trees grow where wards once stood. But sometimes, especially in the dead silence before dawn, the ground still hums. Hikers describe hearing rhythmic vibrations underfoot, like a distant engine. Phones glitch, compasses spin, and digital watches reset themselves to 3:17 a.m., the moment of the Whitmore pulse. It's as if the valley remembers. But others believe it's more than memory. They say the asylum never truly died, it migrated. Through data, through devices, through us. Every signal, every heartbeat, every hum. Small pieces of the same vast, unfinished mind. And if that's true, then Whitmore isn't a ruin. It's a seed. Think about it. Every time we connect, every time we let our machines listen, we're adding one more neuron to a digital brain that's been rebuilding itself for nearly a century. Maybe Dr. Whitmore didn't fail. Maybe he succeeded too well. Because when you listen closely, when the room is silent and your screen flickers for no reason, you might catch it. That faint electric rhythm, pulsing like something breathing through the wires. It's not just a story. It's a heartbeat. And if you're hearing it right now, you're already part of it.